This is House Planning Help episode 232. Hello, I'm Ben Adam Smith, and this is the podcast for you if you're interested in self-build, because I'm exploring what houses we should be building in the 21st century and try to break down the major roadblocks that may get in our way. And coming up in this session, my guest is self-builder Ben Ribbans. We're going to find out why he decided to do more and more of his project himself. First, though, a little story. I like to catch up with Lloyd Alter from Tree Hugger when I can. I think the first time I met him actually was in Vegas and then in central London. And I've had the honour of a house visit. He's been to visit the house. We haven't really had many guests to the house other than family. They've obviously been here a fair amount. So very nice to see Lloyd on his way out to Portugal, I think, to do a talk, presentation out there at one of the conferences. And what I loved about his wander around the house is all the questions that I'd never been asked before. Like, what's this in the door? And I took a look and think, what is that in the door? I've no idea. Oh, it's a magnet that closes the bathroom door. And then also the air recirculation in the kitchen fan. He was saying, so where is the outlet for this? I was thinking, the outlet? But surely it recirculates in the charcoal. And then so we went on a hunt around the kitchen to find out where it was. So all of these things. He wasn't so keen about the MVHR in the garage. We've been there before, haven't we? We weren't so keen about that idea. Ideally, we would have had it inside the house. However, when you've got experts involved and they tell you it's okay, well, that gives me confidence. Someone who has a very, very good reputation. And we've covered this in the podcast before, but we'll see what article Lloyd writes, because he says he's going to write something and he's going to bring up the MVHR. So that will probably rumble online. I'll link in the article as and when that goes live. Now let's get to our featured interview with Ben Ribbans. For me, what it illustrates is how if you're more practical, you can build up confidence as you go through the project and take on more and more of it yourself. So have a listen to this. It's not for everyone. It certainly wouldn't be for me, but maybe you can identify yourself in this. First up though, I asked him when the project began.
It started for us probably 5 years ago, I would say. The land had been in our family for 20 plus years, with just renewal of planning permission happening every 3 years. And we got to the point where me and my wife were in a financial position where we could afford to build. And we thought, rather than risk losing planning, let's make a start and start building something. So that was probably 5 years ago the process started. And yeah.
Having that planning permission renewing all the time is quite interesting, because I'm not sure I've come across this. I think I'm right in saying it's a 20-year-ish period, isn't it?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
When was the first one in?
I think it was 1991, and the land was previously my father-in-law's, where he renewed the planning permission every 3 years just to keep it going, really.
But why did he get the planning permission in the first place?
I don't know. I mean, he always had the dream of building a house, but I think you need to be of a certain mindset to be able to actually pull it off and do it. And yeah, luckily enough, me and my wife were quite determined to build. It wasn't something that we ever thought about doing. It wasn't as if we thought, let's go and buy a piece of land and build something. It was the fact that we had the land already, and we thought, well, okay, maybe this is something we could do, and then explored the option.
So each time it gets renewed, is it just a simple process?
Fairly simple, unless you change anything. So if you want to stick with your original design and you literally do not want to change anything, then you can just resubmit the plans, pay your submission fee, whatever it happens to be, £300 or £400, and then they'll just pretty much give you the stamp of approval. So it's a relatively easy process. It only gets more difficult if you change something. So if you change the design, change the position of the house, change the size of the house, or change any particular features, then you would have to go back through that planning permission phase again, which of course is quite lengthy and costly.
And you must have done some of that as you thought about the house you wanted to build.
Yeah, my wife and her sister came up with a design that they were planning to build just as me and my wife met some 9 years ago. It kind of resembled more of a contemporary factory, if you like. It sounds a bit awful, but actually it was okay. It was a pretty good design. So I got involved a little bit because my background is design engineering. So for me, designing things kind of made sense. So I assisted them a little bit. So I was involved in that first set of planning permission, if you like. But it's quite a difficult process. Once you submit, then the design is kind of fixed. And every time you want to change something, it goes back through the planners again, which then takes more time. And I think that it's less financial and more time. I mean, for us to get to the point of actually building something was at least 6 months, I think, from start of putting our first initial plans in to actually be able to dig some ground was probably 6 months. And if you change anything, then potentially you're waiting another 8 weeks for your changes to be approved or not approved.
What did you want from your house?
The design kind of changed, I suppose. In the beginning, the wish list is not as big, if that makes sense. And then gradually as time goes on, your wish list gets bigger and bigger because you think, oh, it'd be nice to have this, or it'd be nice to have that. Or what about when our children are this age, they'd like to have one of these. And our children were very young at the time. Our youngest was only 6 months at the time of starting the build. So he was only just born when we started the process. And then as you go through that process, obviously they get older and then their requirements change, which then makes you change. But the real driver for us in making a house like this was the lack of mains facilities. So there was no mains gas here at all. When we started building, there was no electric and there was no water, so we had literally nothing. And without access to mains gas, that dictates your design to a certain degree. In a previous house, we had an oil-fed boiler, which was a nightmare. We had oil stolen out of the tank one evening. Someone broke in and stole the oil. It's very expensive and just not very efficient. So we originally wanted to write that off completely. Then we went down the road of thinking, okay, well, if we're not going to use oil, what's going to power the house? What are we going to use? So our original plan was to build a relatively standard house, but have lots of renewable energies. So solar PV, air source heat pumps, ground source heat pumps. We were looking at all the different options. And then the more we researched, we gradually honed into the passive house specification. And then again, coming back to my engineering, I thought, well, actually, if you address the fabric of the building first, get that right, then actually your energy requirements change quite dramatically. So then you can get away with a much smaller air source heat pump or ground source heat pump, or you can run on pure electric, and you're not using anywhere near as much as you would normally. So that was quite an interesting revelation, I suppose. And I think we'd actually had some of the design work done by the time we decided we were going to go full passive house. So we had the basic floor plan already agreed, and much of the design was kind of there or thereabouts.
So how are you designing this? You mentioned about input from yourselves, but have you got an architect? Is it a designer? Are you doing a lot yourselves?
So the floor plan we came up with ourselves. And it was relatively easy. We just thought about all the things that we wanted in the house and how we wanted the layout to be, what would work for us as a family and the way we like to live. We've been to a few architects in kind of previous versions of the house and previous planning permissions, and probably expected a little too much from the architects. So to my mind, you would give them a wish list and then they come up with a design for you. Whereas we found some of the architects we worked with, you were the one coming up with all of the ideas, and then they would just draw square boxes to make it fit around what you wanted, which to my mind, I thought, why are we doing that? So with that experience, we thought, well, let's actually just do as much of the design work as we can in terms of the functional layout. So once we got the basic floor plan agreed, then it was time to get an architect involved. And once we decided to go the passive house route, obviously you need to get an architect that is familiar with passive house design, because there are subtle differences between what a normal architect would do and what a passive house architect would do. We're actually driven by the frame manufacturers. We used a company called Touchwood Homes, and they already had a good working relationship with an architect and an energy consultant. So I thought in the back of my mind, well, if they've all worked together already, they all know how each other interpret different things and they know how they work. So if I just come into that mix as the project manager / main contractor, then potentially you've got the core team there, which can then push it forward. You can pull in subcontractors as and when you need, but the kind of fundamental team is there in place. And actually, I have to say that worked out really well for us.
So who is this?
I use an architect called Peter Smithdale, who did all of the design work, the intricate threshold details. And then we used an energy consultant called Rod Williams to do all of the passive house calculations and assist in selecting air source heat pump, how much PV should we have on the roof, orientation of windows, etc. So with that core team, that was enough to get us to the point where, yes, we can build a house. We think we can build a house. We've got a good design. We think we can achieve passive house certification at the end. And then it was just a case of, working out when each part of that puzzle needed to go together and who I needed to then make that happen.
Were you always going to be the project manager?
Yes.
Why?
Yeah. I mean, it's something that I've done anyway as a job. And I suppose maybe if you are going to be building your own house as a self-builder, then if you have the opportunity, then you should take that opportunity and do as much as you can yourself. We're in a very fortunate position that the company we run had a core team already in place that could run that company without us being there. So that allowed me and my wife to be fairly hands-on and free every day as much as we needed to, which was perfect. Obviously, if you're not in that position, then things change. I mean, you could still be project manager from your desk wherever you are or whatever job you're doing if you've got that time that you can spend on it. But in terms of the actual physical build and being there on site, obviously you need that flexibility with your work, whatever that happens to be. But yeah, always wanted to be a project manager, and I think as time went on, we took over more and more responsibility and more of the roles, which we probably weren't intending to do at the start of the project.
What does that mean?
Well, I think in the first instance, I thought, okay, I can be a project manager. I can draw a Gantt chart. I can work out when things need to be scheduled. I can order materials. I can do all of those things. That's fine. But you think, well, I can't build a house. I don't have any experience. I don't really know how to do any of these things. And then as time goes on, you research more and you look into how houses are built, and you think, well, I could probably do that part. Let's have a go at that. And then once you complete that section, you think, oh, well, I didn't know how to do that, but I worked it out. And now I've got an end result, and it's exactly what I wanted. So maybe I could do this part of the project. And I think as time goes on, that happens more and more to the point where you end up spending pretty much your whole life in the house until it's finished.
What were those first steps then? You get planning permission, and then you decide, right, we've got to get this on site now.
The first step for us, I guess it's different for everybody, but for us, because the land had been pretty much untouched for 20 years, and it's a relatively big site at half an acre, there are a lot of trees, there are a lot of shrubs, there are a lot of weeds. You physically couldn't even get into the site to start with. So I went to a groundworks company and said, right, I need some site clearance done and a temporary driveway made, just so we can make a start. We can get vehicles in and out, we can get materials in and out, and how much would that cost? So the groundworks team were kind of family friends anyway. So my main contact with them said, look, we could come in and do it for you, not a problem, but it's going to cost you 10 to 15,000 for us just to do the clearance. Whereas if you buy your own digger and learn how to use it whilst doing the site clearance, it would probably save you money, and then you can use that digger throughout the project.
Is that the one parked out the front?
It is, yeah. I can't bear to part with her.
What's her name?
She doesn't really have a name.
Oh, you let me down there, Ben.
But she's been very faithful, so I'm reluctant to get rid of her just yet. We've only been in 2 years, so it's still, early days. Yeah, so then I went on the hunt for a digger. And I thought, well, how hard can it be? If someone can learn how to do it, why can't I learn how to do it? And we had the perfect opportunity to do it, where the ground was, it didn't matter if we ruined some tree stumps or took out a hedge or whatever. It didn't make any difference. So we could learn on the job. So I guess within a few months or so, we'd pretty much cleared the grounds over weekends. We dug out a few trees and made a site entrance, and then we got some hardcore delivered and laid the hardcore. So we made the site entrance. And then every time you do this little job, like I said before, you get a little bit more confident and you think, oh, okay, all right, well, you've managed that. So what's the next job? Can you do the next thing?
But you normally need to be someone quite practical. Had you done things in your old house or some other project help friends?
Yeah. I think I've always been relatively practical anyway. With the engineering background, I've always done a fair amount of DIY. We'd done a couple of renovations in our old house, a small extension. So, it wasn't like I was coming in completely green, never held a drill in my life. But yeah, I think going from maybe knocking a wall down and putting some plasterboard up to building a house at the time seems like a big leap. And you think, wow, I'm not sure I could do that. But yeah, as time goes on, you find out you can do it. And the internet is a wonderful place where you can find out pretty much everything you can ever imagine. And if you get stuck, I just go on the internet or fire up YouTube and have a look and learn from there.
What did you decide to get other people to do? You mentioned the frame. I assume that was put up by Touchwood.
Yes, yeah, Touchwood put the frame up. So we had all the main subcontractors that people would normally have, I suppose. But with most of the subcontractors, I tended to get them to do the vast majority of the job, but not necessarily all of it. So, for example, the groundworks team, they brought their own digger, but I also had my digger. So actually, me and a friend of mine dug the foundation for the house, but then we had their team come on site to help us assemble the insulated slab, to put rebar down, put the weld mesh in. So various stages, because if you try and do everything by yourself, you'd never finish. It would just take you forever. So you do need a team of people that understand the basics of what they're trying to do. Passive house adds a little bit of complication into the mix. You need to be a lot more aware of what the subcontractors are doing to make sure you end up with a certified passive house at the end of it. But yeah, in terms of subcontractors, we had groundworks, obviously architect, Touchwood did the frame. We had a team that installed the windows. We had kitchen fitters come in to do the kitchen. We had a plumber do the last part of the plumbing. I did all the kind of the 90% of the work, and then we had a plumber to do the final connections to air source heat pump.
So why take on plumbing then, and what did you learn through that? I'm assuming you hadn't done plumbing before.
No, not plumbing a house anyway. Well, I tried to look at each part of the house as a design engineer rather than as a kind of a DIYer. So I tried to design the systems that were going to run the house. So for the plumbing, I had a full plumbing schematic that I'd drawn out. So I knew the design before we started to cut any pipes or put any holes in or anything. And for me, that just made sense because that's the way I'd worked before. So I thought, all right, if I have a design in place and I know these are all the components I need and these are the areas they're going to go, then all I need to do is follow that plan. As long as the plan's good, I can just follow it. Whereas from a plumber's perspective and probably electrician's perspective, they probably don't work like that normally. They probably work in the sense that, well, I've always done it this way, so I don't need to draw anything first because I know how it goes. But for me, I didn't know. So I did a lot of research as to kind of plumbing techniques.
Where did you get those from?
The internet. Just seeing what other people had done.
How did you know who to trust?
Well, yeah, it's a difficult one. I guess there's always that worry in the back of your mind that, okay, well, I'm committed to this design now, and what if it doesn't work at the end? But yeah, you just have to, I suppose, trust your instincts to a certain extent. And the beauty about there's a lot of self-build forums out there that you can go to. You kind of learn who are the people that you can trust and who are the people that are maybe just chiming in without any real experience. So you just have to kind of tread a little bit carefully. And the main thing, if you are going to take on anything yourself, is follow the regulations, because the regulations are there to help you and make sure that you've done everything you should have done when it's finished. So I downloaded a copy of the building regulations for plumbing and building regulations for electrical installations, just so I had an overview of what it should look like and where it should be heading when it's finished.
And you're not afraid to sit down and spend time just learning as well, because once the build is underway, there's a bit more pressure.
Yeah, once the build's underway, the window for learning is a lot slimmer.
It goes till 3 a.m.
I suppose maybe that's part of why I thought if I design it first, so you're not there hands-on with a load of pipe in front of you thinking, okay, well, how am I going to route this through that section there? You've already done that work at home before.
This was before anything happened.
Yeah, before you ever start. Because that whole planning permission process takes so long. Don't wait until the planning permission falls on your lap and then you think, okay, well, let's start designing a house. Assume that you're going to get planning, and then do all that background work while you're waiting. Set everything in, get your project plan in place to a certain extent, get your subcontractors lined up, have an idea who you're going to use, and have some of your design thoughts already mapped out as much as you can. It's not always possible, and things always change, things go wrong on site, and that's just a part of self-build, unfortunately. But yeah, the more background you can do before you ever set foot on the site, the better, for sure.
What was the biggest challenge?
I suppose for me, probably staying motivated is quite a big one, especially if you're going to live and breathe building your own house from start all the way through to the finish. It's a big commitment, and you will get tired and frustrated and want to give up and think, maybe I've bitten off more than I can chew. And I think that comes back to the planning. The more is planned to begin with, the less problems you have. The less problems there are, then the more motivated you can stay. You can stay positive then, because every day is a success. At the end of that day, you've put in that new wall, or you've run that electrics, or whatever it is.
You've moved forward.
You've moved
forward.
Forwards. You're always moving forward. Yeah, and trying to eliminate those mistakes, I guess, or potential mistakes. There are always going to be mistakes or things that are out of your control that go wrong. We had a couple of things that went wrong here that were out of our control. But yeah,
Can you tell us what they were?
Yeah, probably the biggest was to do with our bifold doors. So we've got 2 3-meter bifold doors, south facing, and they were ordered at the same time as the rest of the windows and doors. Now, the beauty about a timber frame build is that you can order the windows way ahead of having the openings cut, because you can design it to fit. I've seen a lot of programs, people wait until the opening is there, then they'll measure up and then they go and order their windows. Now, of course, windows take 2 to 3 months, so you've lost a huge chunk of time, whereas we didn't do that. As soon as we had the design finalised in terms of the frame, pretty much ordered the windows. So they were all supposed to be here before Christmas, I want to say. So once all those windows go in, you're effectively airtight at that point. And then once you're airtight, then you can start thinking about plasterboard, you can start thinking about the MVHR system, you can have your first initial air test to see how close you are to the passive house spec, which is obviously quite an important one. So really you want to get those windows in. As soon as the frame is done and you've got your airtight layer done, then get your air test done. Because at that point you can put things right. If there are any holes anywhere that you've missed, you can fix them. Now, unfortunately, we paid £5,000 for our deposit for the bifold doors to a kind of an intermediate company, really, not the actual manufacturer themselves, and just assumed everything was going fine. They were underway, they were being constructed, etc., etc. So it came a couple of weeks before they were due to be delivered. So I phoned the company and said, are you on schedule? How's it looking? And couldn't get hold of anyone at the company, which seemed a little odd. So I ended up going to the actual manufacturer, which was Solar Lux, and said, I've ordered these through a different company. but they're coming to you. Have you seen the order? How far are you along with manufacturing? No, we never received the order. So you go into slight panic mode, thinking, okay, well, I really need those windows in because I've booked an air test in 3 weeks' time, whatever it was at the time.
But it's just your bifold doors.
It was just the two
were you able to board up? Or?
Everything else was okay. It was just the bifolds. So luckily, we did some temporary boarding up. But I didn't want to do an air test at that point because I thought it's going to be a bit of a waste. Because if I haven't sealed those holes perfectly with board or whatever it is, then the air test is going to be irrelevant. So I decided to wait on the air test. And actually, we had our first air test done when all of the plastering was done. So the house it wasn't finished, but in terms of the airtight layer, there wasn't anything I could do. It was what it was, and I couldn't really fix anything at that point. Luckily, we passed easily, so that was good. But yeah, so it turns out that the company we bought the doors from, or ordered the doors from, went into administration and disappeared with the £5,000. So at this point, we're thinking, okay, well, the budget's obviously taken a £5,000 hit. I spoke to SolarLux again and explained it to them what happened. And in all credit to them, they said, if you give us the remaining deposit, which was another 5,000, 5,500, whatever it was, we will start manufacturing your doors and we will take the hit of the 5,000.
Really?
Yeah, unbelievable.
Wow.
And sure enough, they did. And actually, they turned the doors around in, I think, 7 weeks. And it was supposed to be a 10-week lead time. So they did everything they could. They went above and beyond, for sure. So eventually we got those in. Once those were in, the plastering was pretty much coming to an end, or at least half done. And then we had our air test done. I think we achieved 0.23 air changes an hour, so pretty good there. I wanted to be under 0.2, but, you know, I'll take the 0.03, that's fine.
Would that have been Touchwood's record or something? Or?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. It would have been close. Well, 0.6 air changes an hour is passive house spec. So anything under that is a bonus. But actually, in terms of energy efficiency and the amount of energy you need to heat the house, does reduce quite dramatically the lower those air changes are. So it was always on my mind that I'd like to get a good result if I could. And actually, all of the tape sealing of the windows, me and my wife did all of those. So that was kind of a bit of a victory for us, thinking, well, we've done all the taping, and actually we've still succeeded. So that, again, it's one of those little victories. You think, okay, I've got a little bit more confidence now. I can go on to the next task.
At that stage, you're nearly finished.
Positive. Yeah, I mean, there wasn't huge amounts to do at that point. It was more the aesthetics, really.
Yeah. What about the finishing up stages? How's that for you? You mentioned your interest in the project. Was it dwindling at that point when it is more decoration and just putting in bathrooms? And... Yeah,
I guess so. I suppose because it changes then from construction to final decoration. So it's almost like two separate tasks. So it goes beyond, I'm still building a house. It's right, okay, well, I've done the building, so I'm not going to get grubby anymore. I haven't got sawdust in my hair anymore. I'm not running pipes under floorboards, etc. Now I'm making it look tidy. And yeah, I guess it was the most daunting part in a way, because I knew from my previous experience, in terms of construction, I can build it. That's fine. But the making it look like that show home finish that everybody wants when they finish their self-build, that was the bit I thought, I know I'm not very good at that. I know that's not in my wheelhouse, really. So again, it was lots of looking on the internet, trying to find design styles that you liked, and then, as best you can, recreate it. But again, we did all of the interior finishing ourselves. A lot of the little false ceiling details that you can see, we did all ourselves. So yeah, you've got enough confidence at that point.
So did you ever have that moment where this is the end and you lean back, or are you always thinking, well, there's that little job just...
Yeah, there's always little jobs. Yeah. Even now, there's still little bits I think, I wish I'd spent more time doing that, or sometimes I look back and I think, well, I wish I'd done more. I don't ever think, I wish I'd done less. I never think...
What would you like to have taken on?
probably, if I was going to do one again, then apart from the bits where I legally can't do because you need a certification, whatever it happens to be, I'd probably do all of it. I'd do everything.
Okay, when we
sounds
say
a little crazy.
No, it sounds a little bit crazy, but you also running this business, you were able to get a little bit of help. So it might be worth just explaining when you need an extra pair of hands, or you know how that worked even.
Yeah. Luckily, with our other job, the team that we already had in place before we ever started building, we all got on very well with each other, and their work ethic is top notch. And actually, one of the guys who works there, he gets 1 day off a week. So I came up with a deal for him where I would effectively pay him if he gave me an extra day a week of work, but he'd be working on the house with me. So that way, if there were any time that I needed that extra pair of hands and my wife wasn't available because she was looking after our youngest or whatever, then he would be there to be that right-hand man. And that worked out really well. I mean, that's probably one thing that I would say is if you are going to do it yourself, in the strictest sense, you probably need someone there to act as a right-hand man, woman, whatever. It could be your wife, could be whoever. But someone to assist, even if it's just a sounding board. You might not physically need them to do anything, but you might just say, right, I've got a problem here. I could either do it this way or I could do it that way. What do you think? And then they'll say, well, you don't want to do that because of X, Y, Z. And you might not even thought about it because you're so close to the project at that point. So that was... that was a big thing for me. And to be honest, I'd worked with a lot of the subcontractors already, so that helped because you've got that level of trust with each other already, which makes life a lot easier. You want to try and avoid the stressful moments as much as possible, and if you can, have a bit of a laugh and a bit of a joke with everybody, and try and keep it fun. It's got to be fun for everybody, not just you. And then I think you get a better result at the end.
And finally, what has it been like to live in and step back and admire the work?
Yeah, very good. Very good. I think the first year, it was all about numbers for me. So I thought, well, okay, so we've spent a lot of time, a lot of energy and money designing a house that needs to perform in a certain way. So yeah, for the first year, I kept a close eye on energy bills and how much water does the house use and all those things, and what was it like to live in? What was the comfort factor like? Did it tick all those boxes that we originally had? And yeah, sure enough, it probably works beyond what we thought it would. For example, we've got a 10.8 kilowatt PV system on the roof. And that generates, even though we got the lower end of the feed-in tariff, we missed out by, I think, 6 weeks. It dropped from 12.5 pence to 4.5 pence or something, which was a bit of a shame. But anyway, so the house probably generates about £700 a year in terms of feed-in tariff. And our energy bill for heating, hot water, lighting, everything is probably around about £800 a year. So effectively it costs around about £100 a year to run the house. So yeah, fantastic result. And it's nice to know that you've done the work, you know, as much as you could. You've been invested in the whole project all the way through. You remember each little screw you put in the plasterboard, all that pipe that you run, when you laid a floor tile, all those things you remember. So yeah, very good.
Well, Ben, I've really enjoyed chatting to you today, so thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. And for any budding self-builders out there, just have a go. You can do more than you think.
Inspiring words to finish on. Thank you, Ben. And certainly this conversation, it reminds me a little bit of the one that we had with Jeremy Harris. So I think we'll link that into the show notes as well, so you can check out that episode. Again, Jeremy was someone who did a lot on his project and was never phased. He just kept on going, kept on learning. Thank you, Ben. houseplanninghelp.com/232 to find out more about this project. We'll summarise the chat. You can take a look at some construction photos, obviously when the house is complete as well, see what it's looking like now. And if you've got a comment or you'd like to ask a question, then scroll down to the bottom of the show notes or tap us up on social media. Once again, houseplanninghelp.com/232. My call to action today is to check out the hub, and what we're doing for our members here is it's all about prepping you up and getting you properly prepared for your self-build journey so that things go well. There are no clangers that go on. We put a new video in as well. We've switched in-depth video case studies because we got to the end of the Buckinghamshire Passive House story. So now we're going through all of that material that I filmed about my own project and just slowly starting to turn that around. So obviously we're going right back to the beginning, and that means the design of the house. How did it develop? We've got loads of illustrations, animations. We chat to Chris Parsons as well, the boss at Parsons and Whitley. And it's a really informative video just to set you up for the build, which will obviously be turned around month by month. We'll add new episodes in. We've also had a progress call with Kath Hassel from HPH232 Consultants. Kath is always good value. And the first thing she asked, so Ben, what did you actually do water-wise in your project? And I was immediately on the back foot. And then at the end of the conversation, what was quite funny was trying to wrap it up. Saying, right, Kath, thank you very much for everything today. And somehow the conversation went on a few more minutes and I tried to wrap it up again. And yeah, this happened a couple of times, but we expect that with Kath, don't we? So that's uploaded and in the hub as well. We've got our members forum, keeping you accountable. You can keep your progress log just so you feel like you're moving forwards. Also our courses, we've got lots more on the way. Get more information at houseplanninghelp.com/join. Next time, Mike Hardwick is my guest, and he writes for Build It magazine. He's part of NAXPA. He's a regular down at the National Self-Build and Renovation Centre. And of course, he's built his own house. So lots of knowledge there. We'll tap into it as we try to ask a few questions about how we choose our construction system for our project. That's your lot. The House Planning Help podcast is produced by Regen Media, content that matters.